Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello, this is Dr. Russell Strickland, the founder and CEO of Dissertation Done and host of An Unconventional Life podcast. I am so excited today. I have with me Dr. Marlo Rencher. Dr. Rencher bills herself as kind of Indiana Jones meets Dilbert, and I am so excited to talk about that. She is an entrepreneur, an anthropologist who studies really the kind of the business culture. She's working to help her community in Detroit, and I can't wait to have her share her story with you. First, I would like to remind you this episode is brought to you by Dissertation Done. At Dissertation Done, we help adult doctoral students to complete the dissertation process as quickly and efficiently as possible. So if you're getting ready to start your dissertation and you would like some help, some coaching, some guidance to get through the process, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. However, if you're like a lot of our students and you're feeling a little stuck, a little stalled, a little confused and frustrated, then certainly reach out to us, dissertationdone.com/done. We'll have a quick talk, see if you might be a good fit for our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program, where we again help students finish their dissertation in generally about a year or less, and always years faster than students would on their own. And if by any chance you have moved on from the dissertation or you're working in the expert space as a coach, consultant, public speaker, counselor, anything like that, there's no better way to expand your authority, to build credibility than to be a published author. And through our Expand Your Authority program, we actually help bring people from the blank page to being a published author faster than they ever thought possible. So check us out at dissertationdone.com/book. That's dissertation.com/book. If you'd like to become a published author in that expert space. So Dr. Rencher, thank you so much for joining me here today. As I told you, I'm excited. Before we started the episode today, my kids were really interested in this whole Indiana Jones meets Dilbert thing. And so I can't wait to get to that. But before we do, tell me a little bit about your journey going into the doctoral degree process. What prompted you to decide to do this kind of crazy thing of going out and earning a doctoral degree?
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes, education has always been something that's very, very important to me. Both my parents are teachers. We have like a whole family of teachers. My brother's a teacher. My husband's a teacher. It's just kind of always been a thing for us. And so I got my undergrad at Michigan State, got my MBA from the University of Michigan. And as I moved forward, I really wanted to delve a little deeper into things. And the Ph.D. seemed like a really interesting way to go. And I was really, I had a specific path set up for me in terms of the Ph.D. and then it just kind of changed. So I
do that.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said, doesn't life always just do that?
Yes, it does. Man plans, God laughs and all that. And, but, I would say that journey, ended up being one that I would choose now, even though I would never have predicted it. And I really believe that having the PhD has helped to, round out completely what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I like that notion of, be prepared, have a plan, be intentional about where you intend to go, but keep your eyes open for what life has available to you. There are all sorts of opportunities that our former doctoral students at Dissertation Done have taken advantage of after they graduated that they never told me about while we were working on the dissertation. They hadn't thought about it. It just wasn't there. I certainly can't imagine that I would have written hardly, any chapter of my life before it started. I don't think that's the chapter I would have been writing. I always had a plan. I always have, things that motivate me and strategically things that are important to me. but when the opportunity avails itself, you gotta make those adjustments. So I think that's good advice for anyone, but particularly when you're starting such a brand new chapter in your life. Be open to the opportunities it's going to provide for you.
Absolutely. I would wholeheartedly agree.
So what was the plan going into the PhD program?
Yeah, so actually it was, I thought, a pretty well thought out plan. So I'd had this undergrad in marketing, and I went to business school. And so I wanted to deepen that authority around business. So I was going to get a PhD in business, and I had filled out all the applications. I was all ready to go. Went to a conference around business. And when I got there, or a conference for aspiring business doctoral students, when I got there, what I found was that nobody seemed to be having fun in doing what it is that they were doing. At least most of the people, it seemed to me, I just didn't feel that connection, except with one group of folks. They were at Northwestern University, and they didn't call themselves business students, they called themselves ethnographers. And so I was like, what's this ethnography thing? And it turned out that the person who was running the doctoral program in the business school at Northwestern was a cultural anthropologist. Mm-hmm. And he was a traditional four-field anthropologist, had done his research around, I think, Irish fishing villages or something like that. And it just I actually went, traveled to Northwestern University, sat down, talked with the guy, and I learned a lot more about what anthropology is and how it can be applied to the field of business. And it actually ended up being the case that I was working at a place. I was about to take a job which connects to the job that I'm in right now. It was the first time I was at that place. And it was connected to Wayne State University. And Wayne State University happens to be the place where business anthropology was created. And so, that I had went to this conference, connected with these folks, talked to the guy who was at Northwestern, who was this renowned anthropologist, who told me that Wayne State University was the place that business anthropology was born. And it just turned out to be the case. I was about to take a job where my school, because of my connection, that job would be paid for at the place where business anthropology was born. I was like, okay, maybe this is the path that I need to take. And it really helped me to, like my MBA taught me to answer questions and with frameworks, and my PhD taught me to ask much better questions.
That's really good. Reminds me of a conversation I had when I was a graduate student. I was a TA for a person who was teaching kind of the science class for students who aren't going to take another science class, the freshman survey class. And somehow we got into this conversation heading back to the department one day that undergraduate professors, their job is to teach undergraduates so that they graduate knowing that they know everything. Mm-hmm. And it's the graduate professor's job to teach the graduate students so that they graduate realizing that they know nothing. And,
absolutely.
And it seems, like a sort of a counterintuitive thought process, but really that notion of growth, of recognizing, of being confident enough to say, I don't know, because that's something that it's a little hard to teach early on in life. I'm teaching my kids that right now. Mm-hmm. And they're fighting me tooth and nail on it. They're like, no, I know everything. Of course I know everything. But getting to that point where you're confident enough to say, I don't know, and then to ask good questions is so important.
Absolutely.
So you get into the PhD process. Mm-hmm. What was the dissertation process like for you? What were you expecting going in, and how did that live up to or refute your expectations?
Well, it was a series of starts and stops in that anthropology takes a while to do. On average, I think it's like 10 years because there's so much time in the field. And so for me, unlike any other degree that I had, there was no guarantee that I was going to finish. So I had gone through the whole kind of classroom part and the defense part, or the early defense part. And then when I went through the dissertation process, what I wanted to find out more about was what are the sociocultural aspects of the entrepreneurial process? Like what's the human side of entrepreneurship and within entrepreneurial communities? And so it took a while for me to do it. I had been an entrepreneur before, and anthropology asks that you take an insider view of things. So I started a business, and in that business, I created my dissertation. And so it was very much a deep process that involved me changing my life. I remember my advisor told me that at one point, it's going to have to be your primary focus.
Right.
And I didn't believe that necessarily at the time, but I got to know that is indeed the case. So there was a time in my life where I had to make it the primary focus, even with young children, even with being married. And, I had to change, quit my job and do something a little different. So it was a challenging space, but certainly one that I navigated better with help, with a buddy, with structure.
You say with help, what was that like? You mentioned you had like an accountability partner, or what
So
that buddy work?
Some of it was the help of my husband and being willing to have me have a part-time job for a while.
Yeah.
Some of it was I got the opportunity to do a couple of writing retreats. And at a point, it did take me going away, doing a writing retreat with a group of people, having a cousin that lived in, many, many states away, and living with her for a couple of weeks to finish some writing, because being a mother, with the young children at that time, it was difficult for me to have that focus that my advisor said, you got to have this focus in order to finish. So basically tapping into the village and saying, look, I need this help to focus and finish.
And you've mentioned, a couple of the aspects that we've found over the years are very important. Actually, one of our students early on studied this for her dissertation, like what type of support do you need in order to be able to finish, particularly a dissertation you're doing remotely. So
yes,
if you're a traditional doctoral student, if you're in the university community, you're going into campus every day, you've got, the basement office with like 10 other graduate students or something like
right.
that. You guys all create a culture. There's normative pressure to do the things you need to do, and what those things are. The older students who are ahead of you started to teach you what it was like to be a graduate student, and then as you grew through that process, you started teaching the younger group of graduate students that same thing. But when you're disconnected from that community, it gets to be much, much harder because all of those cultural aspects are gone.
Absolutely.
What she found is that there were 3 types of support that go into a doctoral process. And the first thing she called operational support. And that's just basically knowing what the hell you're doing. Because let's face it, none of us do going into this thing. Nobody came out of the womb, understanding this is what a dissertation is. It's a man-made construct that's kind of counterintuitive in many ways. And you just have to learn what it is and be able to plug into it. So operational support, somebody to tell you how to do what you need to do. And then emotional support, because again, most of the world doesn't do this sort of thing.
Right.
You have to have the confidence to know that you can do it, and that kind of emotional centeredness and knowing this is something that I can make happen. And there it's important that people who are doing it or who have done it are part of your circle. So you mentioned that writing retreat where you did get to plug into kind of this culture, and people who knew what you were going through could be supportive of you, because as great as your husband probably was, if he hadn't been through this process before, at some point his support falls flat a little bit because you're still questioning yourself and asking, can I really do this? And he can't answer that question for you because he simply doesn't know. Well-intentioned as he may be and as smart as he may be, if he hasn't done this before, then he doesn't know what it takes and doesn't know whether you have what it takes or not. And one of my students from way back when illustrated that point for me when she said at one point she just got fed up with her husband, who They love each other deeply. They never fight until one day she snapped at him and said, "Shut up. You don't know what the hell you're talking about." And I said, "Well, why did you say that to him?" And she said, "Well, he told me, honey, I know you're smart enough. You can get this thing done."
Mm-hmm.
And she was feeling that self-doubt and that, I don't know if I can do it. And his support came across as taunting to her. So it's important you have people who know what this process is all about and been through it before. And then what your husband did provide for you, which was awesome, was what we call practical support. He said, "Honey, you don't have to work full-time while you're doing this. Take some more time for your dissertation, drop down to a part-time job." And that was probably one of the key things that you needed in order to make it happen. So it's really interesting how your story really reflected those three different touch points that one of my students found through research so long ago in terms of the support that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And fortunately, I was able to return the favor a little bit later.
So did he went through the process as well?
Yeah.
Wow, that is it's so awesome. Yeah, I hear about that so rarely. It seems like it would be a little more common that, birds of a feather and all that kind of stuff. But it's so rare that I hear of a husband-wife doctoral duo. So that is really, really cool. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So, so you mentioned some of the some of the issues as you were going through the dissertation process.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that you found that really, beyond logistics, beyond just finding the time to do it, was there anything you found that kind of got you really slowed down, stalled, or stuck at some point? Was there any major challenge you had to overcome beyond the logistical?
I think part of it is also recognizing that what I am saying is original and worthy enough to be said. Is there something there? And in the moment, because I'm so immersed in it, I'm not as clear that is, that something there exists as I'm writing it. I'm not, because I'm so immersed in it, it's like, okay, I'm just seeing all this stuff and I'm not able to pull back and see the value of it, but I've gotten over that. And it's been valuable to me personally and just to other folks, the product that came from it. So but in the moment though, just convincing myself that this enterprise is worth it. And to keep
What do you
going.
think the root of that issue was? Was that like an imposter syndrome, or was that a being too close to it, not seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing?
I think it was more being too close to it, because I felt that I felt some level of confidence kind of generally, but just in the stuff of it, it was just kind of surrounding me, and I didn't see this special sauce until being able to step back from it a little bit.
And how did you do that? Because I think that's important. I think a lot of folks probably face that type of issue.
Mm-hmm. I think so. A lot of it was in the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to reflect back those stories to other people.
Right.
So just having conversations about it. And actually, this is something that I've taken with me and still deal with to this day, that, sometimes I don't realize that the things that I know that are second nature to me, that I've accumulated over just a lot of time and experience, that I don't think are so special, are really not so easy for everybody else,
right.
Are really valuable for everybody else. And just because it's easily accessible to me and something that I know, doesn't mean that there are a lot of people out there who would appreciate having that information.
That's
so
100% that's something that so many people in that expert space don't realize, and that borders on what we were talking about earlier with the imposter syndrome, is that you have spent a lot of time creating this valuable experience set, but you just don't value it as much as other people do. And sometimes that's hard for people to see in themselves, is how valuable what you've been through and what you've done really is. Because certainly when we start talking about a doctoral degree, you're putting yourself head and shoulders above most of the competition right there.
Yeah.
You know, you're in the 1% at that point. So it's a really good point. But so the understanding the value in the framework, I get that. What about, you mentioned in talking with people, some of the connections came out. Was that an issue of, by teaching, you were clarifying for yourself? Or is that an issue of getting feedback from those people and finding out what the valuable moments were and what the ahas were from other people? Where did that, where did the benefit arise?
Part of it is in teaching and in talking. I mean, some of those things kind of blur for me. Right at the end of, as I was graduating, I did a TED Talk on, the things that were that I discovered in my dissertation, and crafting that TED Talk, trying it out with other people was really a clarifying moment for me. Because I'm in the entrepreneur ecosystem locally, I was able to bring some of the things that I discovered into conversations in the ecosystem, and they were just, it was a different perspective from most folks who don't have the same kind of training. So those are the things that help me to be able to contrast what I know from what is known, and able to help me bring some value to that.
Yeah, that's I appreciate that notion of teaching as being a valuable learning tool. You mentioned the TED Talk. How I understand that they're really good about helping you practice and craft and refine. What was your experience like in that process?
So I did TEDx, not like regular TED, right? But that process, when I was a lot younger, like in undergrad days, something told me that I was going to have to learn how to speak publicly a lot. So I got the distinction of just learning how to practice speaking in front of a lot of people. And so naturally, I started doing a lot of practice with that. And that involved, so I usually have a group of people that I might go and try a talk with. And so that helped me to gain some perspective around it. And even just kind of crafting the talk, because you really have to get beyond all the kind of anthropological lingo and get to something real and relatable to people. It helped me to distill all of the things that I got into, I now have like 2 sentences that I can say, this is what I learned from my dissertation. And that, that was really helpful. And something I talk about all the time, even now.
And that's really important, is to understand what the key takeaways are for not just the colleagues, people who are anthropologists and who are into all the lingo, but for somebody you meet on the street. We used to have, when I was an undergrad, I was an undergrad in physics and math. I was a double major. And in physics, we talked about this thing that we call the Grandma Theorem. And it was that you don't really understand something until you can explain it to your grandmother.
Yeah.
And that wasn't to say that your grandmother is, intellectually inferior or anything like that. Just that your grandmother probably wasn't a theoretical physicist, which, statistically is probably pretty likely.
Right.
And that notion of being able to take something that is complicated and really involved and intricate, and you're banging your head on the details all the time, and to be able to come back from that and say, here's what's really going on, I think is so important. In that same sort of genre of science, I really like Neil deGrasse Tyson and the talks that he gives. If you're familiar with him, he does a really good job of knowing the things, and I'm pretty sure that anybody who wanted to go deep and get into the equations and all that kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure he'd be fine with that. but he
Yes.
doesn't do that in his talks. And he provides tremendous value in his talks from being able to just communicate things in a way that's clear to a wide audience. So I think that's a very, very valuable lesson for anybody who's going through this doctoral process, to spend a little bit of time thinking about, why is this important? What is it that we're getting from this?
Yes. And just knowing who you're doing it for, like, and I'm interested in these things myself personally,
Right.
but I use this to help entrepreneurs. And if I keep it, if I keep that understanding, then it is much easier to communicate the value.
That's true too. When we work with folks who have gotten through and earned their doctoral degree, and they're wanting to build a business, and in the expert space, they want to be a coach or a consultant or something like that. That's one of the things that we talk about in creating that platform. Number one, who are you talking to? You need to know who that person is, and you need to know them in detail so that you know how to talk to them. You know what their concerns are, what their problems are, and what sort of things are going to resonate with them. And so with the dissertation, it's a different thing. But once you start communicating to people sort of in public, then you really, really want to make sure that you know who you're talking to. Because for most people, well, I would say this is almost true universally. If you're ever talking to everybody, then you're talking to nobody. You've
Right.
got to figure out who your audience is and really what's going on. Even to the point where when your message is as broad as a politician's, well, still they tend to talk to people who kind of agree with them, and they just hope that they can convince enough people to be in that audience that they're going to get elected. But even with a message that broad, they're not talking to everybody. People who are saying that, no, your policies are completely wrong, and I don't agree with them, and I never will. We're just not going to talk to you. We're going to talk to the people
Right.
who we at least think we have a chance of convincing, and who are going to agree with us. So that notion of who you're talking to and crafting a message for them is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Well, tell me now that you mentioned that the talk and so forth has, excuse me just a second, let me get rid of that. There we go. You mentioned that that it was really important to find that message for entrepreneurs. What was it that you learned in your dissertation? You mentioned you had a couple of sentences, and how is that affecting your work now?
So you broke up a little bit at the end, and it's probably on my end, but
Sorry, I'll just say again, you mentioned that idea of getting your message, of being able to distill it, as being very important. And I'm wondering, what was that message? What did you learn in that dissertation process, and how is that impacting your work now?
So what I was particularly concerned with was high growth tech-based entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And what I learned is that in the very beginning of starting a startup, the business is basically a conversation. That's all it is. And most entrepreneurs are trying to put material on that business in order to bring it out of a conversation, a spoken word, into real life.
Okay.
So one of the rituals that they do to do that is a pitch, elevator pitch. It's
Right.
very similar to, it's the central ritual of entrepreneurship, and very similar in a lot of ways to like a priest doing mass.
Mhm.
It is kind of exhorting higher powers towards creating something new. And how that impacts what I do today is I direct in Detroit at an entrepreneurial, a place where we help entrepreneurs to grow. I direct the technology-based programming there. So anybody who wants to start a tech business in Detroit, we are a really, really great resource for them. And what I recognize is that the pitch has to be really good, but then also that they really have to focus themselves on creating something that's of value outside of what's in their head. They have to get in other people's heads. They have to actually start talking to customers.
Right.
Customers are really scary people to talk to when you're a beginning entrepreneurs, but really I try to break that down very quickly. And that's part of what all the study that I had helps me to do now.
So you mentioned that customers are a scary group of people to talk to. Why is that? What do you have to break down for folks to help with that issue?
You have to make a separation between people's identity and their business.
Okay.
So when somebody says no to your business, they're not saying no to you, they're saying no to the way you're trying to solve the problem at that time.
Yeah.
So you have to make that distinction and have people think of this as an entrepreneurial career and not this is you that you're putting out there to sell.
Correct. And that's really important. I know folks do have that problem with the dissertation all the time as well.
Yes.
You have to, there needs to be some professional detachment. I tell our dissertation students, that there's this common trope that the dissertation is like your baby. Well, if the dissertation is a baby, you want to be not the parent, you want to be the surgeon. You want to be the person who's going to do what's necessary to make this thing viable, but not the thing that's going to, be emotionally cleaved to every single decision that gets made. And the same is really true for a business. I think it is like a child growing up in some sense, and you have to you have to be pleased with the fact that the child can stand on its own 2 feet at some point, as opposed to have all of your hopes and dreams and desires pent up in that child. That child's destiny is not known to you at the beginning of the process.
It's an interesting balance between being passionate enough to attract people to what you're offering,
right,
and not giving yourself away, and perceiving yourself to be given away by some of the decisions that you make with that business. So it's an interesting balance.
How do you help people with striking that balance when the business is sort of a new idea, when it's something that the person has, not just do I want to go out and help people in a certain way. I don't want to just start a new paper company or something like that where it's tried and true and we understand what it is. But I have a new vision for the world, and I want to actualize my new vision for the world. How do you help people separate in that kind of context?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I think that's where high growth businesses, tech businesses, innovative businesses are different. You do need to give a little bit more of yourself into those businesses than with other kind of business. Like if you're starting a McDonald's franchise, operationally, your path is pretty set.
Right.
But you're going to have to give some of your creative energy. Like another thing I learned, like I said, it's a conversation, but it's your conversation. So in the very beginning, it is you, and it has to be you until the point that it isn't you. You have to kind of give it away. So to answer your question, I would say they have to lean into the creative process, but understand that that creative process can't be outside of the context of the customer. So they will have to allow themselves to do something crazy that nobody will believe in. Use that passion to continue to iterate and create this thing until you find that tribe of people who are like, this is my thing. This is the thing that solves the problem that I needed to get solved. And it's not going to be something that happens immediately. I didn't get Twitter for a very, very long time. Like I didn't understand what they were trying to do with it. I do now.
Yeah.
It's pretty ordinary now, but you really have to dig a little deeper in that creative energy, which means you have to take a little bit of yourself into, I think, innovative companies.
So when we talk about, as you mentioned, innovative companies, where it's an idea, you said it starts with a conversation. What do you find is, where do you find the notion of revenue streams and a profit motive where does that come into the DNA of the business in order to make the business successful? Because I think that there's a lot of research that shows, and a lot of just ad hoc experience I've seen, that what makes businesses really successful, certainly in the expert space, is the fact that you care about solving the problem. You want to serve people, you want to make their lives better in some way. And when you're passionate about the thing that you can do to make the world a better place, the money tends to flow. But in those models, it's pretty clear where it's coming from. There's coaching and consulting and things like that. It's pretty clear where that money's coming from. You know, in a model like Twitter or some of these other sort of innovative platforms, it's not necessarily clear where the money is coming from, how you're going to make money doing that thing. And the idea of sort of clamping on or bolting on a revenue stream can break the promise of making the world a better place. So does that make sense? Where do you begin to incorporate that notion of revenue in order to make the business successful?
I think that what's interesting to me as a business anthropologist is that a lot of anthropologists feel like it's selling out to deal with money.
Yeah.
I don't. I think that you should I think it's really great to make a lot of money making people's lives better. I think it would attract more people if they find out they can be multiple millionaires by making the world a better place. I do think that, to answer your question, where the innovation in that case has to come is in business models. So when I say that, I mean like you can have this interesting idea, but what you have to really figure out is things like, okay, maybe instead of somebody owning this thing, they can rent this thing. Mm-hmm. And if they're renting it, then what we're really, really good at is providing the platform for them to rent this thing, like as in an Airbnb. Mm-hmm. So you find out exactly what's the least I can do to solve this problem, get very, very good at that, and then innovate the way to get paid through that. So I think that innovating business models, innovating the way to get paid, the method and the means to get paid, and having that be a little distinct from, the problem that you're solving, distinct but related, is, part of what we're seeing happen now, where, people are moving away from ownership and things that, when I was really young, stuff that you just wouldn't think to share with people. Like Uber is such a interesting concept for me growing up, where we did not get into strangers' cars. And now I don't even look at taxis. I'm really getting into my Lyft when I get to the airport. So I think that, just to answer the question, I think the innovation around business models is where some of that a lot of that problem gets solved.
And when does that come into play though? Like, I guess again with Uber, it kind of makes sense that you're talking about changing the model of a taxi driver. Mm-hmm. Lots of these things kind of make sense. I'm trying to think of something where it's just not clear where the money would come from, and no example is coming to mind right offhand. But mm-hmm. I know that there have been things in the tech space where people looked at it and they weren't making money for a very, very long time. And it seems to me like they never really thought about, how are we going to make money with this? They just thought about, this is a thing we can do to solve a problem, to make the world a better place in some way.
I think
I'm wondering if there's a switch, basically a discriminator that says, if you consider money as a complete and total afterthought, then you're going to have a lot more trouble than if you kind of bake it into the DNA. That's kind of what I'm wondering, is if there's anything like that you've noticed or that research has found.
Yeah, actually, I'm smiling because what many of those, if you think about the Facebooks and other large tech companies that had early venture capital funding, mm-hmm. such that profitability wasn't an issue originally, is because they had the privilege of having that kind of funding.
Right.
As this tech space becomes more democratized and more diversified in terms of the number of people entering it, What has not democratized and diversified in any appreciable way is how people are getting funding in it. So there are people who are coming into it, they're not getting the level of VC funding that traditionally white males who were in this space got. And so part of the things that I'm dealing with as a director in this technology space is, and we're working on a program right now where we're dealing with, okay, you have this MVP, or this early prototype of what it is that you're doing. It has a buy button, so you have a way to get money. We're creating a program now that is, how do you iterate a business model that works? Because you're more than likely, even if you have the best thing since sliced bread, you're more than likely not going to get venture capital funding. That is more than likely something that's not going to happen, even if you have something great. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is probably a good thing that you're going to keep most of your equity. So if that is the case, how do you create a way to get paid to make it work? And literally, this is something that I'm working on right now. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, the training sequence in Rocky and Karate Kid, where, they're just kind of working through this piece. We're designing now this experience where they're working through, okay, what's the best way to get paid? Let's figure out 3 different business models for this thing. Don't just go with what you originally came in. 3 different business models, what works the best? So it's interesting that you asked that question, because we're facing that with this colliding of all the different kinds of people coming in. The venture capital space is not nearly as diversified, so people are not writing these checks. So how do you innovate the business model while still keeping your eye on the problem that you're supposed to solve? And that's what is funny that you're talking about that, because that's what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I think you helped clear something up for me, is this notion of venture capital being harder to come by solves the problem in a sense. You mentioned that, there's some of these folks, they want to focus on solving the problem, making the world a better place. And anthropologists, I guess is the context you mentioned. Anthropologists think when you bring money into it, it kind of dilutes or poisons or lessens the situation in some way. I find a lot of folks that we work with who are experts have the same kind of feeling. Not that they don't want to get paid, but they don't like the idea of selling. This concept of selling, they think of as the used car salesman, that kind of stereotype. And what you have to do is you have to understand that selling, that making money, that bringing in money is the way that you help people. It's the way that you make things better. And this notion of not being able to get a big check from venture capital and go out and spend somebody else's money to solve your problem, I think it fixes the mindset issue of, why are we doing this dirty business model thing? We're doing it because that's how we help people.
Right.
That's how we get the job done. I think it should probably help with a lot of that mindset issue, to know that this is a thing we've got to do, not because we're greedy or capitalist or any of those kinds of things, but simply because this is what's needed to make things better. If you get if you get paid, the more you get paid, the more people you can help.
Let me just say also, we have so many, there are people who have that mindset of, oh, I'm going to hold my nose and sell something. But the reason why TechTown, which is the place I work, exists is not even as much to get people to get to their entrepreneurial dreams. That's part of it. But because of all the people that you're able to employ as a result of having a thriving and successful business. I grew up in the city of Detroit. If we had like 5, 10 high growth businesses, the way that I grew up and the things that I saw growing up would be very, very different from what other people would see.
Right.
So I'm interested in people making lots of money and employing people who are very, very, able to put their kids in the schools that they want to put them in, have them go to the colleges they want them to go to, and to have the quality of life that they need to have a better life. So that money takes money to do that, and it takes profitable businesses in order to have those kinds of employees. So I wholeheartedly believe in the way that capitalism works in that situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it certainly, so capitalism is a kind of a mathematical system, and these things have stable points in a variety of areas. It certainly works the way that you said. There's a halo effect that the entrepreneur, when they're making themselves strong, when they're bringing in money, they're making themselves richer. In order for them to do that, they can't do everything themselves. So they have to hire people. There has to be some distribution of that wealth. It just has to be that way. If you have a social concern about it, it is how you value and how you decide how much of that wealth you want to distribute into your organization. And that's where we're finding some problems with capitalism, is that it's getting too concentrated in specific areas. And I'm not sure exactly how we're going to solve that problem, but I think there is a way to get there. And it is something where, to a certain extent, a rising tide lifts all boats. So yes, you're going to say that the CEOs and some of the founders and entrepreneurs, their boats might be rising faster than others, but the others are rising as well. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're thinking about getting into this, that naturally you're going to be able to help not just your customers and the people that you were thinking about helping, but your community as well, as you become a place of hiring employees and having those employees go out to lunch around the office and renting office space and all of those things that drive an economy. It's important to understand. Yeah,
absolutely. And as you have more people who are from these same, you have a different group of people leading these companies, and they're led a different way.
Absolutely.
And I'm really excited about that opportunity.
Well, so tell me, with TechTown, who's the person that you're talking to? We mentioned this notion before of knowing, who you're benefiting and whatnot. Who's the person, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you about the work you're doing at TechTown, who's the person that you're talking to, and who you would best be able to serve?
So what we focus ourselves on are my whole mission, or my whole job, is to kind of increase the pipeline of entrepreneurs who are in and of the city of Detroit. Okay. That is a different entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur, than most people see. What I would say is that folks who have a tech idea, something that you might not even identify yourself as a tech founder or a techie, but if you have an idea that's around technology, that's who we're intended to serve.
And do you have any sort of incubator processes to help folks that are in the earliest stages, or do you work with folks who have already proven a proof of concept? Where do you really start working with folks in this process?
I say yes to all of that because we have multiple programs. So we start with Start Studio. That is, do you have an idea? And the intention with that is, if you have an idea that you've thought about, you've formed, that you are really interested in finding out, should you go or no go?
Yeah,
that's our program. We have a 12-week program that goes through the customer validation process. We use all types of anthropological techniques, even assign an anthropologist to you. And I think we're the only program probably that exists right now that does that. But we assign an anthropologist to you that helps you through that customer discovery process. And it's, at the end of it, you do a go or no go. And at the end of it, if it's a go, you have an MVP or an early prototype with a buy button. That's the intention. But we also have a program that's incubator, that's for companies that have started generating revenue. And that's, how do you go from being a startup, kind of, this is my idea and we're starting to generate revenue, to building the operations and infrastructure to be a small business.
Grow and scale.
Exactly. And also we're developing this program right now, the name of which is to be announced, that we'll be opening up in the beginning of the second quarter. That is that, like, you have this MVP with a buy button. Let's figure out the business model that gets you to recurring revenue. So that's the one that I'm really excited about. We're going to be kind of combining a podcast type of way to deliver information and a peer learning platform. So it's not just like this lecture of this is what you need to do. It's like, this is the experience that we're all going through. We're going through this training. It's kind of like a dojo or something where you're trying to figure out what's the best way, you know, and you have a leaderboard, everything is tracked. You know, it's actually something that I'm really excited about. I think it'll be a really great experience for folks who are trying to build great businesses and not just pitching to get money.
Well, I think that sounds great because it sounds like you're developing a community, and we talked about this notion of normative pressure when you're in the dissertation process of needing to have other folks around you doing what you're doing. So that's I think that's an awesome experience for folks to get plugged into.
Yeah, normative pressure and community of practice. So they're learning from each other.
Exactly.
That apprenticeship program that you're talking about, the apprenticeship model that you're talking about with the older ones teaching the younger ones, all that stuff should be working on their behalf.
Very, very cool. Now, I just found it interesting that picking out of that description as to how this program works, you mentioned assigning an anthropologist to someone. So give us a plug for anthropology now. Why would you use that term that you have? What is an anthropologist going to bring to bear in this particular application that folks starting a new business?
I'm really glad you asked, because most people who are starting a business they're pitching the business when they're talking to customers. They're asking, do you really like me? Do you really like my business? Would you buy this thing? Anthropologists allow you to step back and say, okay, what is the problem? Can we get a little deeper into the context? You know, what is and it allows us to get beyond some of the assumptions that we as entrepreneurs might have about our the problem that we're trying to solve, even allowing us to understand it as a problem to be solved rather than this is my business. So anthropologists, particularly the ones that we're working with, because we've tweaked their methodology to work really well within kind of the entrepreneurial context, we find it really, really important to get to those insights, and that saves our clients, the entrepreneurs, a lot of time and money because they're not building things that people don't want.
Yeah, no, that's very important. And I think I picked up on one of those, a key word we used to talk about when I was in graduate school, that there's probably about 5 to 10 keywords that you have to use in order to fit in to any group of people. And I think I picked up earlier when you were talking on one of the keywords in anthropology, seems like it was ritual. Do you guys use that word a lot with each other? So that's just a concept. I've seen it come up over and over again, where if you just know how to use about 5 to 10 words, you're going to get through all the cocktail parties. You might get in deeper than that. Even at some point, they'll find out you don't know what you're talking about unless you're actually, got your real credentials. But it's really kind of interesting how these cultures develop this little shorthand vocabulary, and it's almost like a password of knowing if you're in the group or not. Did you use that word correctly? Because if I'm talking about something and you're like, well, why didn't he say ritual? He's not an anthropologist.
You know what? It's interesting that you say that. Somebody introduced me to the concept of the Chivalrous. There's a whole conversation around that, but it's the code that you need.
Yeah.
We're doing another program that's for 50 Black women entrepreneurs around how to be a tech founder.
Okay.
And there's an entire anthropological take that I've had that's part of my dissertation as well. It's like, there's a way of speaking, there's a way of dressing, there's a way of there are those words. Actually, I have a list of 100 of them that people need to know when you're in this world of the tech founder. And those are things that we're also giving to people so that when they step into this world where they're a lot of times seen as being the other or the outsider, they can at least know the language and feel a little bit more comfort.
Yeah, it really is a notion of seeming like you fit, knowing what's the how you should act in a particular situation.
Yes.
for whatever reason, I don't know why, when you said that, this scene from the Harry Potter books flashed into my head, where one of the kids was like pretending to be this evil witch, and she was going to the bank to try to clear out her vault or something like that, and she said, "Excuse me," or "I'm sorry," or something, and someone who was with her like kind of hit her and said, "She wouldn't say that."
Right,
That's
right.
not how you act in this situation.
Absolutely.
And it's important to be authentic, but at the same time, you've got to also look like you belong, and so that's a interesting balance to have to strike.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this program you mentioned, is this something that you're currently recruiting for these women, or where are you at in the development of that program?
So we've gotten our first session. So it's 50 this year that we're working with. We've got our first half recruited for, and we'll be recruiting that next group of folks, in a few months, let's say around May, April timeframe. So that's where we are. We're about to start. I think the first week in February, we're starting our programming.
Awesome. That sounds great. In terms of those folks that are going to be coming in the spring, are you kind of openly recruiting for those folks? Do you want to tell them how to get in touch with you, or is this something that is handled a little bit more close to the vest?
I think the best way to look at it is to go to TechTownDetroit.org.
Okay.
And that way you can see kind of all the things that we're doing, including the STEEP program. And while we're focused around Detroit, we're looking to expand pretty soon.
That's good. That's awesome. So TechTownDetroit.org.
Yes.
Is the URL. If folks want to get in touch with you to continue this conversation in any other way, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Best way to reach out to me is through LinkedIn. And my tag there is Marlo Rencher, MarloRencher.
Awesome. Now we'll have on our blog on dissertationdone.com, we will have show notes, and we'll make sure we get those URLs in there in case anybody missed them. But I want to thank you so much for being with me today, Dr. Rencher. I had a great time talking to people from different kind of academic backgrounds. I think is always really fun, and I don't know that I've talked with an anthropologist before, so
now you have.
I enjoy thing to put down on the list. But I really enjoy getting to see kind of the different perspectives that you bring to problems that other guests of mine have been working on and that I've thought about, and to see that different perspective is really, really cool. I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much for the conversation, Dr. Strickland.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to remind everybody this episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you're working on your dissertation, getting ready to start, or feeling bogged down in the process, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. We'll have a conversation and see if we might be able to help you out. And if you are in that expert space and you would like to expand your authority platform, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book. We'll help you go from a blank page to a published author so that you can get your message out there and help others. Again, Dr. Rencher, thank you so much for being with me. I had a blast today.
Me too. Thanks so much. I appreciate the invitation.
You're quite welcome. And for everybody else, go out there and live your unconventional life.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.